the Yankees, finding they could not destroy the spirit of Virginia, were starving us into submission.
I never before had an idea of the terror caused by the shelling of a town.
General Hunter, it would be of great value to us to get possession of Lynchburg. General Ulysses Grant.
I ordered his property to be burned. Major General David Hunter.
Every man and boy is now in the ranks, prepared to defend that sacred spot called home.
I believe, though, that all had determined to do or die in the attempt to hold the city.
Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. In June, Greg Starbuck and Andrew Prasse won a total of 3 Emmy Awards for a documentary film called Hunter's Raid: The Battle for Lynchburg. The documentary was written and directed by Greg and edited by Andrew. Greg and Andrew are here tonight to tell us about the Hunter's Raid documentary, how it came to be, and about being Emmy Award winners. Greg, Andrew, I'm so glad to have you on Lynchburg Live.
Thank you for having us.
We've just seen the trailer to this documentary, and I think it's so exciting and so interesting that it's about Lynchburg. And
well, it is. The story of Civil War Lynchburg, or the Battle of Lynchburg, is a very dynamic and exciting piece of history. And you know, when I first moved here 10 years ago, I long envisioned, you know, how could this be this dynamic and exciting story to be brought, you know, to the public eye? How could it be presented so that people would see, you know, how exciting it was? And the result is this movie.
Well, I totally enjoyed it. As we get started, though, let's backtrack a little bit, and if both of you could tell our audience what you do in your mundane lives.
Well, it's not really a mundane life, but during the day, I'm the executive director at Historic Sandusky, which is one of the key features of the Battle of Lynchburg, of Civil War Lynchburg.
And I'm a freelance videographer and editor. I used to work in marketing, but now I do commercials, PSAs, and work with Greg on any projects he has coming down the pipeline.
That's wonderful. And you have not been a graduate too long from...
Went to Washington Lee, graduated in 2008.
So that's great. All right. You have a long and extensive Civil War background. Can you tell us a little bit about that, being an enthusiast and being an historian?
Well, yes. I guess I started my interest in the Civil War in the 1970s, and following graduating from Virginia Tech, I worked at a Civil War fort down in Savannah, Georgia, and got to play with a lot of its Civil War history, and that's a whole different, what happened in Georgia is a whole different story than what happened in Virginia, obviously. And I returned there in the 1990s as the director of that fort, and then later went to work at the National Civil War Naval Museum in Columbus, Georgia, and then made my way here to Lynchburg. But worked on several Civil War sites, either as a volunteer or as a staff member, and that's just where my interest lies.
I think people get sort of addicted to this. The reenactors seem to.
Yeah, a lot of people do. You have reenactors, you have buffs, you have collectors. I mean, there's all different ways that people express their interest, whether it be war games, whether it be books, whether it be the reenacting, whether it be, there's some people that almost make a career out of just working on Civil War movies. You know, there's just all different ways to express that interest. There's people that are really fond of going on battlefield tours, and that's just, and I know people in Lynchburg, anytime a battlefield tour comes up, they go out on them. So there's many ways to express that interest.
Now, you told me you were born not here.
That's right. I would say from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
But Andrew, you are from here.
Yes, I was born and raised in Lynchburg. So.
All right. How did you get involved in this?
I guess it started out, I was at Washington and Lee as a freshman, and I knew that Greg was putting together a movie about Lynchburg during the Civil War. So I guess I came down and was an extra in a couple of his shoots, some VMI scenes that we did a long time ago, and that's how I first knew about the project. And then, you know, a couple years passed, I graduated college, you know, worked in marketing, and really decided that my passion was with filming. Bought a camera, bought the editing equipment, taught myself how to, you know, do that, and then met up again with Greg and was like, I have a camera, I have the editing equipment, I know this movie still, you know, needs to be made, so, you know, if anything I can do to help, please let me know.
So you kind of knew each other before,
right. Well,
before this started.
Yeah, he just kind of arose, you know, like cream, he rose to the top. It was classic story, you know, I've got a bass guitar, well, you're in the band.
All right, now, Historic Sandusky Foundation, what role did that really play in this?
Well, the production was done under the aegis of the Sandusky Historic Foundation. It was a production by the foundation. You know, every historic site, here's sort of the short chronology. Every historic site has some type of video component that tells their history. And usually they use that as an orientation film. It's 12 to 15 minutes. And that was what we wanted to do. That was our goal. When we started looking at the Battle of Lynchburg, what happened at Sandusky, you know, it grew. You can't do that in 15 minutes, and then you can't really talk about the Battle of Lynchburg without talking about Hunter's Raid, because that sets the stage. That's the prequel to what happens here, is all the battles and you know, events in the 3 weeks prior. So you know, it grew into this larger regional sort of production. And then we later went down and edited down a short version that tells the story.
So this is really how it got started, where you got the idea. You just got the idea and then it
Well, you know,
blossomed.
Sandusky was a startup historic site. It didn't really exist until about 10 years ago. So one of the things you do, you know, is in starting up a historic site is you have some video component. And this is that component, maybe run amok.
Had either of you had any filmmaking experience of this magnitude?
Not at all. I mean, I had bought the camera and played around with it, and I taught myself, you know, how to edit on a computer, but nothing that was, you know, 55 minutes or long form like this. It kind of turned into a monster, basically. You know, all the footage that we had and all the people that involved. I had never, you know, worked with that many collaborators.
It's probably like a lot of authors who start writing a book and all of a sudden the book sort of writes itself. You know, you find out you can't wait to get back to write another day to see what's going to happen.
There were days like that where we just couldn't wait to get back to it, and then other days where we were happy to set it aside. It was a pretty big project.
Now, are either one of you Civil War reenactors?
Well, I got my start in the 70s as a reenactor. That seems to be kind of the starting point for a lot of Civil War enthusiasts or Civil War professionals, because it's just a way that people express their interest, and I don't get around to that much anymore with my responsibilities at work, and I'm kind of old to look like a Civil War soldier, but young Andrew here still can portray a soldier and do it well.
Yeah, I've, I guess, been reenacting for around 10 years with
great.
my father, and I'm a member of the unit that Thomas Tarkington and Kevin Schroyer, I guess they were on the show.
They were.
So yeah, It's been fun. I had always had an interest in the Civil War since I was real little. Learned how to play the drum so I could be a drummer boy, that whole deal. But it's just a great way to spend time with my friends. And as a Civil War enthusiast, there's no better way than actually going out on the battlefields and trying to put your mind what the soldiers did.
It's really bringing history to life.
Right.
And I don't think you can really feel it like you can when you're doing something like that. So I admire you, for doing it and for you having done it. Now, Greg, how long were your plans on the board to do this before you actually got started?
I would say several years. We really wanted to. I've been plotting to do this for several years, and I would work on it in little pieces, basically for the price of pizza. We would get people in, and I can't pay you and I can't do much for you except I'll buy you lunch. I'll buy you pizza. And so we, every 6 to 10 months we would have some type of film session, film shoot, buy everybody pizza. And we had a very steep learning curve as far as the technologies involved. But I would say several years plotting it, and then several years, I think 5 years, putting it together.
Did you ever get discouraged? When a project sort of gets lengthy,
yes.
Sometimes you want to toss in the towel.
Well, honestly, I thought at one point I thought if there's one thing I want to do before I die is I want to finish this film, because I thought it, as we got into it more, it's sort of like unraveling, just there's just so many loose ends, and like, will we ever get around to pulling all these clips together? I think there's something like 2,500 separate little video clips.
There are a lot.
and then all the audio. So there were times I honestly did not think it would get done.
So this turned into your bucket list and the bucket.
That's right. Yeah, the whole kit and caboodle.
All right. Have you written a screenplay before, or was this the first?
Well, sort of. In Savannah at Fort Jackson, we did an orientation movie down there, and I wrote the screenplay for that, if you will. It's very short, very simple. That orientation film, the theme was pretty much, here's what happened on what day. And so it was very easy to do. It's just very short and sweet. This was still a learning curve doing this. Writing for the spoken word is entirely different than writing for the read word. So, learning to do that the hard way was kind of the way we went.
So, but you did have some background in doing this previous.
I suppose.
Background.
Yeah.
All right. How long did it take? I'm not sure about this question, but how long did it take to actually research the project? I do a lot of research for these programs that I do, and so I know how much time you can spend on something very small. I can't imagine how long it took you.
Well, a lot of the movie, I knew the script in my head just because I'd learned it as a function of my job, and anybody that has an interest in Civil War history, in Lynchburg knows the dramatic story of the civilians and the young boys and the old men and the trains and all that. I always likened it to, this is a John Ford movie. This is a John Ford script, and so the plot points or the sequences, were pretty evident. I didn't really have to do a whole lot of research. What was time consuming was the research to figure out what's all the content, to get from this point to that point, or let's try to get as many voices of people that lived it and experienced it into the film. So there was a good bit of research there. I ended up setting up like 3 6-foot banquet tables in a row, and I took down all of our files and all of our books, and I spread them out, for a week or two, and just laid things out. And what's really rich about the Lynchburg story is that there's so many accounts that some cases I'd have 4 or 5 accounts that said the same thing. So it's like, well, do I want her to read it? Do I want him to read it? Do I want him to read it? So, we just laid all this stuff out on the table and eventually, even did it in chronological order. So it was so big it took 3 banquet tables to try to organize it.
Right, now, Andrew, you said that you were kind of with this project from the beginning.
Yes, kind of.
Now, I want to know what roles you played, but I also understand, I read somewhere that you were the go-to man for special effects.
Yes,
and
yes.
There's some pretty remarkable special effects in this show.
I did. The special effects was actually anything like shot in camera, so there's smoke, explosions, fire that we actually created. So we did a couple of those shots, and we had people running around with smoke bombs and that type of stuff. Visual effects are any of the effects that I did in the computer, and I did a lot more of those. So digitally, after the film has been shot, I'd put in smoke or explosions, replicate people. So you turn 10 people into 100 people.
Don't know how you do that.
It's really just the art of deception, and you create these shots and you don't want them, you spend hours on them, so you're like, I want 5 seconds of this to be in the final piece, but in the end you really just want to trim that down. So we might put a second or half a second of an effect shot into the to the final piece, just to get the whole scope of things, and then go back to live action shots. So it's a big puzzle.
I think it takes a lot of talent to be an editor, to edit something like this, especially just listening to you talk about what you did. Now, the film was funded by Historic Sandusky Foundation.
Well, largely, no. We didn't really fund any of it from foundation funds. We went out and did some fundraising. There was a private donor that helped us with it. Also, the Lynchburg Convention and Visitors Bureau foresaw the movie as a potential tourist jewel, and that's turned out to be the case. So they came in with some funding. We also, I think, the Lynchburg, Greater Lynchburg Community Trust helped us a bit, and one other foundation. So we had a couple little sources of money that helped us along the way. Largely, the movie was made with sweat equity. We had to have some hard dollars, in many cases, to buy things that we just could not beg or barter for, like music and certain effects stuff that Andrew did. So that's what that money was used on. But we so much of it was sweat equity, where we, people donated their time and talent.
I imagine you have to be really inventive to
completely.
do the special effects on a limited budget.
Exactly, and the whole movie. I mean, all of our dolly shots in this movie, we had a piece of plywood on some skateboard wheels with PVC piping. So it's bare bones. But yeah, the special effects. Basically, Greg would come up to me and say, we'd have an idea for a shot, and I'd say I could do that, and I'd put fire or smoke in it, and then he was like, he'd always come back and well, can we do this to this shot? And then it was always we were just pushing each other to get the best that we could, given our means.
Right. We probably aggravated each other because we were really pushing. It's like, well, it's not quite there. How do we do this? And then Andrew would probably be thinking, well, what you're asking me to do is another 5 hours for 1 second. But it's the visual we wanted to get. So,
it sounds
we pushed it.
That you developed a partnership that you really had not expected to develop as you started forward with this project.
Absolutely. This, unequivocally, this movie would not have been made if not for Andrew coming in at the right place at the right time. I was looking, I guess it's like any partnership, Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello or whatever. I was looking for the right person that could understand what I was saying, understand what I was trying to get to, who had, the right amount of talent, just somebody that had the right symbiosis to make it happen.
Right, that makes all the difference in the world, I think. All right, how long did it actually take to make this film?
Well, you know, we worked on it off and on for about 5 years.
Okay.
If you were to condense that, the filming part, I would say maybe if we did that back to back, that might be 2 to 3 weeks of 10 or 12-hour days. And then the editing part, that was tough. I hate to think how many hours Andrew put into it, because there were times I said, well, this is our goal, let's get this. And then I would leave Andrew, and then Andrew would spend the night at home or at Sandusky all night working on that. So I mean, I don't know, how much time do you think you might have into it?
I mean, multiple months near the end of it, just getting everything together. You know, spending long hours. I pulled numerous all-nighters.
I imagine that as things are coming down the wire, as any project, as it gets closer to being finished, that's when you are really called upon to be there more time. So what happened to your mundane jobs while you were?
Well, you know, so much of this, you know, the film shoots we did on weekends. The editing, if Andrew did editing during the workday, you know, I would stop in and maybe spend 10 or 20 minutes looking at what he's doing and saying, well, let's try to do this or what have you. And then I would leave him and go about my job. So in a lot of ways, for me, the movie was made largely on, you know, spare time, you know, weekend time. It didn't really take a lot of time during the work week. At that point, Andrew was pretty much working for me full time.
That's great. I mean, it's great that you could do that and,
Oh, yeah.
and be available to do that. Well, where was the film actually shot? Everywhere? Lots of places?
Lots of places. You know, we used a lot of stock footage. You know, a lot of the, you know, the battle scenes, we just couldn't film that. We'd love to, but we just don't have the time and money and whatnot to do that. So what we tried to film is all the bridges between the battle footage. And we filmed a lot of those at Sandusky, sometimes Sandusky portraying Sandusky. At other times, we used a back area of Sandusky, and it was just the woods. We went around town, we filmed things in front of historic houses, in front of the courthouse museum. We used a farm over in Madison Heights. We used another farm over in Evington. We used the train station over in Evington. Oh boy, lots of places.
Lots of places. My backyard.
His backyard, you know, anywhere we could. I was always, for several years there, anywhere I went around Lynchburg, I would be looking at something going, that's a neat building. Maybe we could use that building and put some people and do this and get some horses.
I think that's just, I mean, it's just so interesting to me. I want to know how you did the on-location shots. We've only got about 4 more minutes.
Sure.
So if you can just sort of tell me that. And
well, what we did, you know, we put out a call by email ahead of time that we're going to do this shoot. We need these type of people. We know we need women, or we need women and children, or we don't need women and children. We need only soldiers, Confederates, or Confederates in Union. And we're going to start. We never really started real early. You know, a real movie you start at 5 a.m.
Right.
But we'd start at 9 or so, and typically we'd go a half day, maybe 3/4 of a day, because you know the people in the movie had a lot of enthusiasm, and they would come in with a lot of energy and excitement. But by the end of the day, you know, the fun wears off and everybody's kind of tired. But we would bring people in. They'd bring multiple uniforms or costumes. We would switch them around, and we would just film as much as we could for about 3 or 4 hours before everybody got tired, including us. And we would, and each shoot was kind of around a theme, whether it was we're shooting just women, or we're shooting just young boys and old men, or we're shooting this. And then we would stop and feed everybody pizza and
that's great.
Hope we did okay.
I thank you for coming and doing part 1 with us. We want to discuss these Emmys that are beautiful, and I think it's so exciting that someone local has won 3 Emmys. So if you all will stay tuned, come back next week. We're going to do part 2 and discuss how these guys won these Emmys and show you some really exciting pictures of the film in production. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.